she thought maybe a humble little group would come together and celebrate John. So, thank you all for coming. John wrote a poem to Raylene for Christmas. It's one really endearing thing that they would do for each other. Is write things from their heart. And she put it in the book. Cover has John on his favorite ranch horse, Pete. He wrote, "This life of ranching and farming might make us go break, but that feeling soon leaves with every long hike we take. From Mother Nature, we've learned to return more than we take. This business of HRM and sure ain't no fake. We both face this life with big hearts and no fear. And I've got a feeling the neatest part is near. This feeling's real sharp, and its message quite clear. So I'm wishing you a healthy and happy new year." And this verse still is on the dresser of John. And Raylene writes, as a token of his hope, silently declaring the future. As Norman Vincent Peale has said, an image vividly conceived and stubbornly held has a reality of its own. In 2007, John and Raylene gifted me this book for graduation, and in the inside, both John and Raylene wrote something, and John wrote, "Emily, I wish you all the best, and I know God will bless you abundantly, John." But what he didn't know was that part of that abundant blessing in my life would be coming to live with them for a summer. And what he didn't foresee was this girl waking up every morning and stealing his coffee, and just like, when is she going to leave? And I know it took a measure of tolerance and patience, because John and Raylene, they live a quiet life. It's quiet, and I don't think a lot of people had an opportunity to see the life that was there. So I was blessed beyond belief. I remember sitting around the table, and Mark Liebig is a soil scientist. He came from Bismarck for that summer, and we were sitting around the table, and it hit me. I couldn't believe I was living in this place, and things looked kind of meager. Like, John's equipment was never up to do anything. And he was fixing on it a lot, but if you looked around the place, it doesn't look incredibly like, wow. But that, it had no weight. I realized, I was like, I can't believe how abundant life is here. It's just crazy. And I think John, I saw him cry just a little bit, and he was tender like that. He wouldn't refrain from shedding a tear every once in a while, but I saw him cry a little bit, and I think do an internship, and we did these meetings developing a strategic plan for their farm, and it's kind of silly too, because John and Raylene, this is just regurgitating. I mean, they had this stuff packed for 20 years already. I mean, certainly developing. And the first meeting that we had, we were going to discuss the mission statement. And prior to the meeting, I was like, what's going on here? Because I mentioned something about it to John, and he got kind of like really sharp all of a sudden. And like, I had to just kind of like, ooh, because he said, we have this mission statement. Raylene could go upstairs in a drawer. We wrote it 20 years ago. And I was just like, I don't want to change your mission. little bit of it with you today. Because John is so deeply rooted in the work that he did. And he was a man that was driven by a mission and by a vision, and he held so true to it. So, and John and Raylene co-authored it. Do no harm. Create an environment fostering spiritual, mental, and physical well-being of humans and animals. Live and work in ways to regenerate soil and plants and their attendant life forms. It goes on. But he writes it was his desire to proclaim agriculture as the ultimate art form, and to allow God's light to shine with great intensity through these passions. And that's where there's a game that we started to play, and John and Raylene and I would play it. We would call it the question game, and we would prepare questions for each other, and then we would sit around the table and we'd ask them. And it was incredible. Those of you who had a short conversation with John would even know that he was articulate, and it wasn't just like fluff. It was like, wow, this is some substance. So, we would prepare these questions, and pretty soon, after the first or second time we played, and I would ask the questions, and John, the answer would be immediately right there. So I got to the point where the game became kind of twofold, where I was like, one hand, I want to learn and I want to know this man's life and Raylene's life, but on the other hand, I want to ask him a question that he doesn't know the answer to. Shoot, but he was an incredible man. He was completely his own individual. He shared with me, even from a very young age, that he knew that he was different. And his lifestyle showed that. And he said, I remember him saying, I like who I am. And that was pretty cool, because I know, I just thought that was remarkable. But I remember there was a day that John and Raylene and I were out there early in my stay at their home, and it was kind of cold, and I was petting some of the big draft horses, and I turned around and I saw John's arm around Raylene, and it just felt like, wow, things are just how they're supposed to be right now. It was like, this is good. And that's the sense that John always had. It was kind of like anything was no big deal, and it was like, this is gonna work out. This is good. I mean, in that field, that's where he would winter their cattle sometimes, and so many passes of the draft horses hauling bales. Mark Liebig and Raylene and I were out there, and we dug up some alfalfa and sweet clover, and this taproot was gigantic, and John held it with such fulfillment that this was, his vision was panning out. But, there's so much to share. And I want to leave room for everyone else. I do ask that if you have something to share, and if you want to kind of reserve it, or if you don't feel like you're the most articulate person, or you get shaky, or your hands get sweaty, or heart beats, maybe just lay that aside. And come and share, because we want to know John. We just want to honor him today, so don't be shy. Come on up. So,
on her blog is called Nourishing Joy, which is devoted to sustainable living. And this is what she wrote for her Uncle John in memoriam. John Nickel, the gentleman cowboy who bucked the status quo. On July 25, 2013, the world lost a generous, kind, strong man, the kind of man of which the world is so desperately in need. I first met my Uncle John when he married my Aunt Raylene. I was just a kid, and his quiet, strong presence was intimidating. But his constant twinkle erased any uncertainty that I might have. I'll never forget his hearty belly laugh, the time he watched my 10-year-old self come tearing out of the barn after being charged unexpectedly by a rambunctious goat. Through the years, he and Raylene wrangled cattle, lived on multiple farms, and raised horses. And not just any horses, work horses. Uncle John was a horse whisperer. He would bring his draft horses out to greet us when we would visit, and I could stand fully upright underneath each horse's neck. But the amazing thing about him and his horses was that he dared to do what few farmers today ever would dream of. You see, farming today is a risky business. To minimize their farm's economic liability, as well to honor his lifelong dream of farming with horses, he used his horses to do much of the farm work. This was a technique that allowed them to not be buried in cascades of mounting debt. Besides, most machines would get stuck in snowdrifts in the winter when it came time to bring in a load of hay for the cattle, but Uncle John and his horses could do it with much less trouble. But even more than watching him with horses, John and Raylene have been inspiring for many years for how they live and farm. This blog is about real food and sustainable living. And even though my husband and I are full on in our journey to live ever more sustainably and to eat real food, John and Raylene are the real deal all the way. When John was diagnosed with an advanced stage of melanoma 6 years ago, they opted out of all the tests and therapies that are traditionally given to cancer patients. Instead, they drove home, prayed hard, and controlled their diet meticulously. They already ate very conscientiously, but at that point, they became even more intentional about drinking large amounts of raw milk every day from their goats and intentionally practicing other natural habits and therapies, which I believe certainly could have had a role in allowing him so many years past that original diagnosis when his cancer was already at such an advanced stage. The last time I saw John was on our last visit to their farm. John built a campfire in the yard, we roasted our traditional hot dogs, and he brought the horses over to say hello to my then 4-year-old daughter. It is a precious snapshot of a man who is dearly loved. Today, members of John and Raylene's extended families gather to remember his life and celebrate his release into glory. I too thank God for John's presence in my life. I am much richer for such a gift.